for Mario. Chapter 1 Realization. It was a hot summer day in the Mushroom Kingdom, a peaceful day to be sure, or at least a peaceful day for most people. But where something drastic was about to change in the lives of the married brother. Our dear hero, Maria, said his beloved baby and totally not emotionally neglected brother Luigi married to retrieve some buttermilk from the fungus grocer's store. Luigi was despondent about leaving, but Mary rather didn't feel like moving after having rescued Princess Peach for the third time in the same week, so Luigi was opted to go instead. More or less, Mary screamed grocerless to him as he walked out the door. And you searched through Luigi's beans. Why did he always have to be the punching bag for Mary's reach? It seemed cruel and unfair, but nobody, not even one of the touts, appeared bothered by Mary's barely believed tendencies. Luigi clenched his fist and a small tear fell from his eye at the thought of his brother's abuse. He wasn't acknowledging his surroundings and begrudgingly walked to the store whence they brought him out of the thought. A green guy, you're Mary's brother, right? A small yellow text in front of the store. He couldn't even remember Luigi's name. Luigi figured at least one of these infected funguses could remember his name. Soon they were connected by a hive mind. Anger boiled underneath his skin, and he had a sudden urge to unleash his built-up frustration upon the small, contaminated child. He was lost in his obscure thoughts again, so lost it seemed, for he didn't even realize that he'd already punted this yellow toad across the parking lot before he even had time to think. A shocked expression formed upon Luigi's enraged face. Apparently his frustration had become so intense that he had actually committed such a violent act on a poor child to get this but the rage did not vanish quickly later. Still, it wasn't the child that can read him. It was the eternal abuse from his brother Mary that led him to this point. How could it have gotten so bad to where Luigi even thought of harming an innocent civilian? Something needed to be done or Luigi would lose his sanity altogether. Pretending that he never attacked a dog, he tried to act casual as he walked into the grocery store. He knew something was up when he didn't even have an anxiety attack at the thought of people seeing him kicking someone across a parking lot. When he walked through trying to remember the list of food items, Mary had shouted at him. He picked up a grapefruit. An idea, Max, a vile idea, Sparky. Chapter 2 Rising Tension. Mario lay on his beer-stained couch watching American football. Half asleep, he threw an empty can of Shy Gold at his TV when the Eagles were losing against those damn Miami Dolphins. A groggy groan escaped his lips as he heard the front door. Luigi was back and had brought the desired groceries, but Mario wasn't very gracious. Maria! Mac, he shot up Mary through a second canvas when he tamed his brother's fist. A soft yell came from his little brother as he dropped the bag of groceries from shock. Mary only turned the TV's volume up as response. Again, Luigi's also familiar contempt for his brother was ignited, but instead of reacting with derision, he merely sighed and shrugged it off. His time would come later and Luigi shouldn't be too hasty. Beginning to pick up the fallen food, a soft smirk appeared on his face. It wouldn't be long now. Chapter 3 The Thick of Sin. The poisoning of Mary's beer went quite unnoticed by the rotund plummet. In fact, he hadn't even noticed Luigi took one of his beers in the first place. He probably would have hit him and yelled again, but that's beside the main point. Nobody wouldn't care what he did, Luigi, anyway, so it's not worth bringing it up. Luigi brought the can of beer along with the bags of picked up groceries into the kitchen. What seemed to be the casual unloading of groceries was in fact a much darker act. Tucked away, hidden from sight in one of Luigi's overalls pockets, was a small vial of cyanide poison. The serum was obtained from eBay at a fairly reasonable price. At first, Luigi wasn't completely sold on the deal. But after hearing about its 2-hour delivery from across the country and its free shipping, he couldn't refuse the offer. The package was ordered to arrive when the idea first struck him at the grocery store, timed perfectly so that it would arrive just by the time he would get home. still amazed at how Mary hadn't even noticed a package arrive at the door. How pathetic Luigi thought to himself. The plumber put away some of the groceries to appear like he was busy. Not that Mary would even notice. But still, being cautious was never a bad thing. The small canister of cyanide was removed from the side pocket of Luigi's denim, and the little cork on the top of it was popped open with a little bat. Luigi grimaced as he heard the sound, terrified Mary might return it. He anxiously peered into the living room, only to find his elder brother half asleep on the nasty couch, mumbling something offensive about forbidding. Neither side of relief came from the soon-to-be murderer. It looked like things were going Luigi's way for once in his life, and that put a smile on his face. The television remained turned on with the sports still playing, giving Luigi cover for making any other sounds in case Mary decided to wake up. This made him more comfortable to open the beer can next, now ignoring the lattice of carbonation. He stared down at the frothing alcohol inside it. When Mary would drink it off and become violent, much more hostile than today's encounter for sure. Often Luigi would suffer the consequences of Mary's drinking. This tiny little can was one of the main factors of the constant abuse he regularly endured, and it infuriated him. And Luigi almost wanted to crush the can out of spite, but held his temper. If he destroyed the can, his plan would be ruined. Instead, he took a deep breath and poured several drops of poison into the beer can. Moments later, he returned into the living room, placing the can of infected beer onto Mary's coffee table, replacing an already open can with this new one. This way, when Mario to drink some more, because Mary doesn't care about hangovers, he would drink the poison without even realizing it. In just a few hours after, his muscles would weaken, his head would spin, his breathing would become labored. At first, he would push it off as a cold or hangover, not thinking anything unusual. However, by the time he'd realized something would be wrong, it'd be too late. The poison would have contaminated his entire nervous system and thus his entire body. He would be dead within minutes after that, and Luigi would be there to witness his final gasp of breath. The satisfaction Luigi would feel be immeasurable as he would watch his struggling brother try to desperately figure out what happened to him receiving an answer. Then Luigi would be free of his brother, free of abuse, and free of living in the shadow of Mario. He could finally create a name for himself and become the new heir of the Mushroom Kingdom. Oh, how perfect life would be for him! And after all the suffering endured by that beast red man, Luigi deemed himself deserving of this fate. Sleep well, bro! Luigi mumbled to the fat Italian on his way passing, wishing on him one last peaceful dream. It would be the man's last after all, so Luigi thought he should enjoy it. A large smile crept up on his face, knowing all he had to was watch and wait. Chapter 4, The Kidnapping. Over the Mushroom Castle, Princess Peach let out a mighty yawn, stretching her beautiful dainty arm. She just woken from a wonderful nap and felt completely refreshed. Her day was going perfect, nothing was going wrong, it seemed. As she began to rise from her bed, she heard a loud scraping sound coming from her bedroom window. I wonder what that could be, she pondered to herself. Curious, she peered outside the castle's opening and noticed the villainous Bowser scaling one of her selected jets. Oh my, she shrieked, covering her hands over her mouth in surprise. A raspy growl of laughter chilled under just beneath where Peach stood. Before Peach had time to call for help, the large Koopa heaved himself into the princess' bedroom with relative ease. Toadstool took a step back from him, unsure on what to do. Come on, princess, let's go! Ushered her to come with him out the window. Underneath it was waving his clown car to carry them both away. Before having time to respond, King Koopa grabbed the princess of the Mushroom Kingdom, hopping into his clown car. They flew high into the crisp summer air, heading towards Bowser's evil lair. Mario held back at the Mario Bros residence. A squeaky toad slammed on the Bros wooden door, creating a large echo within the house. The shrill voice of the child suddenly alerted Mario, awakening him from his drunken sleep. He still had a terrible hangover and wasn't in a good mood. Taking the unknown poison beer with him, he groggily stumbled over to the door, slurring and current babble as he waddled. Slamming open the door, he stared down a fat red fungus who was waving his arms frantically. What do you want? The Italian spoke, though it came out in such a slew that it took a moment for the Todd to process what he said. Mary took a large swig of infected beer, whipping the dribble from it off his skin. It's a princess, she's been kidnapped again. The Todd gasped for breath, having ran all the way from the castle to the Mary Rizard. A heavy dragon outside came from Maria. This would make the fourth time in just this week the princess was captured. Such a pain! Fine, I'll get her. He grumbled, knowing that at least he'd receive some reward. A kiss and cake from Peach only made the whole ordeal worth it, so I figured why not? Another large gulp of beer slithered down his throat, soon to secretly contaminate his bloodstream. In just a few short hours, symptoms would occur, only to increase until his prolonged and confusing death. Thank you, Mary. He slammed the door as the child's face before he could finish thanking him. Luigi! Plumber's loud and aggressive voice boomed throughout the entirety of the brothers' while leaving space. Luigi came down the steps shortly. Bro, yes. I'm going to go save the princess or whatever. Don't get stuck in the drain pipe again while I'm gone. This was the moment Luigi saw the can of beer in Mario's hand, looking hopefully over to the coffee table. He was delighted to see that the can was gone, meaning it was the can in Mary's hand. He watched him in ecstasy as his brother took a drink from it, not knowing Mary already poisoned himself earlier. He was in earth how he watched his own brother seal his fate without even realizing it. The only problem was that he realized he wouldn't be able to actually see Mary's death because of the kidnapping, and that was partially disappointing. Then I just struck him. We were done with him on the adventure. After the poison kicked in, he would drop dead before they even got home. Hey bro, hello with you. Why, I don't need you. Mario stumbled, clutching the door frame. His hangover was terrible, and he clearly wasn't going to get to the castle in time, and this gave Luigi a perfect alibi to tag along. Mario, I need me to help you get to the castle. You're in no condition to go and save the princess like this. Mario burped in response. Now, waving his hand, the Red Brothers started to walk out the door only to be abruptly cut off by his younger sibling. Wait, what's the matter with you? I'm going there, I only want to help you. A smile of fake sincerity was plastered onto his face. Mario, not really caring about his brother's affection, gave up and let Luigi come with him, so that way he'd stop nagging him. Alright, fine, get a move on. And so the two lovers walk out of the door together, what would seem to be last time. Chapter 5 in preparation. Bowser and the kidnapped princess arrived shortly at Bowser Castle, entering through a large window that was made especially to fit the floating clown car through. Bowser, being a gentleman, escorted her out of the cart and into the castle. The two stepped out of the flying vehicle onto the cold stone floor of Bowser Castle. To Princess Toadstool's surprise, she found a change of decoration in the place. Her carpet was placed in the center of the floor with a table in the middle adorned with a white tablecloth. 2 plates silverware and a candelabrum were placed on it as if in preparation for a fancy dinner. Shortly after their arrival, Bowser's many children arrived in the room with big smiles on their faces. Dade's back, and with the princess they shouted, sprinting as they approached Beast. The littlest goblin head thumped up and gave the princess a... Oh, it's great to see you. His shriek little voice penetrated her ear. She bent down to hug him back. She was happy to see them too. Wasn't sure why Bowser brought her here. Slightly confused on what all this meant, she turned to Bowser for an answer. Albeit bewildered, Peach wasn't alarmed in the slightest. In fact, Peach never hated Bowser to begin with. She actually enjoyed his company. When they would say that the princess was kidnapped, it was actually a cover for the two to spend time together. She became quite fond of his many children, starting to have their different personalities. The more she got to them and their father, she realized how stupid it was to consider the wholesome family to be enemies of the mushroom. Kingdom, eventually, they started to develop a strong friendship. The only problem with that friendship was it had to be a secret. If the Mushroom Kingdom residents discovered the princess's alliance with a seemingly evil force, the rebellion would be sure to ensue. If Dogsworth, the central mind of the hive, disagreed with the decision to versus with the cup pass, then peril would ensue, as every single dog would be opposed and, well, each would be overthrown and lose everything. She could risk that. In order to prevent this, the princess and Bowser agreed to keep their friendship a secret. And so, in order to share ideas and interrogate nations, Bowser often would pretend to steal Princess Peach from her castle. Then Mary, who was in on the secret, would rescue her when it was time for the two to say goodbye. Peach, what's wrong now, Sir? Got the bushy eyebrow, not realizing that she'd forgotten about today. Then it hit her. She had completely failed to remember about her and Bowser's double dates. They came back to her now, making her feel incredibly stupid. The couple family had worked so hard to prepare for this double date, and yet she couldn't even remember it existed. What would they think of her to forget such a special occasion? Shaking off the embarrassment, Peach smiled and turned to Bowser, the child still in her hand. Nothing, Bowser. Has everything been prepared? Sure it has. Now we just have to. A loud knock was heard on the door of the room, a groggy voice calling out from behind it. Here's a little footnote at the bottom of this chapter. All the compellings are based off of the appearance in the Super Mario Bros. 3 shiv. Names, physical attributes are implied or taken from the show to avoid confusion. Chapter 6, Red Death. Mary's hear the kids whisper to one another, scattering into the nearest rooms from the approaching plumber. They wanted this to be a private matter, and thought it was better to leave this between the adults. Open up already! The Italian slammed on the door with his fists still extremely drunk. As well as a terrible hangover, Mary began to feel faint as well, causing him to lash out in anger. Luigi was impressed with how resistant he seemed towards the poison thus far, but it was apparent the plumber hardly cared about his physical health right at the moment. All that was on his mind was getting to smooch his special summon, and then go home and watch more football and get even more drunk. After a few seconds of incessant pounding, Luigi got irritated with his irrational behavior. "Hey, bro, I got this," he said, pushing Mario aside, who in return gave him a sharp glare of disgust, panting slightly and resting his hand on the stone wall behind him. Luigi brushed off the anticipation of watching his brother's downfall and walked up to the door. Slowly turning the handle, the door opened with ease. It apparently wasn't even locked. Mario blew raspberry at his brother for having common sense, stepping inside to face Bowser. "Hello, three." The princess waved at the intoxicated Tomato, and a sluggish but surprisingly decent gesture was returned back to her. Even in such a state, Mary would never be crude towards the fair princess. She was much too beautiful for it to be possible for anyone to insult her. Just as Peach was going to ask him what took him so long to read, he was immediately caught off guard. The man in question started to groan hurried, clutching his stomach and getting on his knees. Mamma mia, tears formed in his beady eye, forced to squint from the immense pain. It was all happening so fast, the poison kicking after hours of infecting him. No one had even a chance to react, all except for Luigi. Smiling Brody knew this moment would come eventually, but still, it felt so satisfying to actually witness the slow, agonizing death of Mario. He stared down at his now collapsed brother, feeling no pity for the suffering Italian. Mario, becoming much weaker, looked up at his brother. "Help me, bro," he mumbled weakly, trying to desperately find some resolution in his fate. A shaky hand reached up to Luigi in a desperate attempt to relieve resistance. Luigi bent down, smiling at him. It's over, Mario. The red-haired eyes waiting for the last time, realizing his brother was the cause of this. He tried to speak, only got the blood and mumbled insults sputtering out of his mouth. After a few short seconds and several strings of muffled cursing, Mario fell still, his lifeless eyes staring up at the man who betrayed him. His own brother. Chapter 7, a shocking turn of events. At first, there was an eerie silence in the room. No one knew how to react. Mario was dead. Everyone was in a soundless grief, all except for Luigi. He resisted the urge to laugh at his brother's corpse, and instead smiled with malicious victory. As he stared down with satisfaction, a loud sobbing that broke the painful silence made him nearly jump out his skin. As Luigi turned to find out who made the sudden wail, he found himself gaping from surprise. Instead of Peach crying, it was Bowser. The Koopa King fell on his knees, large ears staining his scaly face. Mario, his voice was soft, much like the commanding, aggressive tone he normally held. Why? Luigi was more than confused, to say the least. Why would Bowser care about Mario? He scratched his head even more when Peach went over to comfort the sobbing beast. I am so sorry, Bowser. She pat his back, trying to wipe away her tear. You! You are so close, Bowser cried louder, his face buried in his hands. I never got to tell him how much he meant to me. The couple looked at the fat man's body, sniffling slightly. I loved you, Mario. Luigi almost fell over upon hearing such a phrase come from the Koopa King's mouth. This couldn't be true. Bowser and Mario love each other. We never even got to have our special moment, our date tonight. It rubbed Bowser's arm, softly comforting him. A loud creak from an opening door on the opposite side of the decorated room could be heard, although muffled by the sound of loud grief. Princess Daisy stepped through the door, this expression on her face. Luigi covered his mouth in shock, as Daisy was only wearing a braid and underwear. She rubbed her eyes, scanning the room in an attempt to find the source of the disturbance. Peach covered her mouth, not expecting Daisy to come out so early. Daisy! What is it, babe? Daisy grunted, not realizing the dead Italian on the floor yet. Luigi gasped it again. Babe, what did she mean by that? Daisy finally saw Luigi standing there and did a double take. Oh shit, our cover's been blah. Peach, I thought this was a double date. Why the fuck is he here? She pointed to the man in green. Paul just now understood what was happening. He couldn't believe it. Mario had been dating Bowser and Peach had been with Daisy. Why did nobody ever reveal any of this information to him? I didn't know he would be here. Peach yelled back. Daisy was about to counter to her girlfriend when she finally noticed the dead man on the floor. Wait, what happened to Mario? Is he drunk again? Her voice turned to one of concern as she saw Bowser crying on the ground. Are you okay, right? Peach looked away, not responding. Bowser was instead the one who spoke up. My love is dead. Well, he's been murdered. I swear it. He came into the room and just fell over. He burst out into sobbing again. Murder Daisy replied in disbelief. Who would have done that? Luigi could barely control his excitement any longer. He just found it so funny that none of them had realized what had happened. That he couldn't prevent himself from giggling slightly. He quickly covered his hands over his mouth, but it was too late. He'd already drawn attention to himself. What's so funny, Daisy asked, placing a hand on her hip. Your brother just died and you're nothing here to explain. Luigi now burst out into full laughter. You just don't get it. I did it. He cackled like I killed Mario. They all shrieked and Bowser stood up thinking. You! Screamed, pointing a mini finger at the plumber. I looked angry at first, but soon the rage left him and was replaced with grief. You! He fell back down. Luigi laughed again, not even caring about what consequences he would receive. But he knew there would be consequences. They couldn't do anything to him as they had no truth. Thence aside from his verbal confession, that alone would never fall in a court of law. As the murderer himself testified about the poisoning. But that was impossible. Murray was dead. Besides, it's not like anything could bring Mario back to life anyway, so Luigi was in the graveyard here. However, the large mushroom with green spots appeared over the red plumber's body. A soft white glow emitted from it, and Luigi's heart sank. And suddenly, one sound could be heard, and Mary jumped up with his fist in the air. "What?" I shouted. Every gasp and Luigi shrieked. No! Could this be happening? Luigi thought to himself as he recoiled from his risen brother. How could he be alive? My Rio boss ran out with open arms, pulling Rio into a beer hut, each join hugging the plumber intensely. You live, but how? I was only in my second life, Mario. Planes, I still had 2 ups left. The others laughed at how foolish they had been to have assumed that Mario was actually dead. No, it can't be! Luigi pounded his fist on the ground, his voice shaking with anger. You're supposed to be dead, screamed to his confused brother. Just as Luigi was about to stand up, preparing to even strangle his brother with his own bare hand, he felt a suffocating feeling in his throat. He suddenly started to choke, clutching at his lengthy neck in surprise. He began to gag, losing air rapidly. What was happening? He questioned silently, his vision starting to blur. Where did I go wrong? The others watched in intense silence while the green brother choked out his last few breaths, stammering slightly as he writhed on the ground. Soon enough, he fell still. What the hell happened now? Easy through. Only the ear, utterly bewildered. Why is he dead now? Unbeknownst to the everyman, Luigi had been the only one to act devilishly in the past few days. Rumors of Luigi kicking a toe outside the grocer's store began to stir commotion in the Toad community. Toads were sensing adult pain from within the central mind. Something was wrong. The hive mind festered with anger. It didn't take long for word to reach him that Luigi had hurt one of the Toads. Toadsworth was furious that he had damaged one of his perfect children and declared that action must be taken on him. When the green plumber was asleep, the other Toads had snuck into his bedroom and poured poison down his throat. That ought to show. They snickered to themselves as they crawled back outside through his window, not disturbing Luigi's sleep. While the others would never know what happened to Luigi Mario, the Toads lived in silent triumph over the man that had hurt one of their own. I'm a fine Mario, exclaiming, but he looked down to his deceased brother. He's a nut. The party swore they could hear the silent anger from Luigi still present with them. They immediately felt better after they dumped his body out of the window. Knowing what else to do, 4 resumed their double date, ignoring what had just happened. Mary and Bowser resumed their date, and Bowser even confessed his love to the other after a rather romantic scene involving spaghetti set the tone for him. Peach and Daisy went off to do other things together. The Toads got their revenge, it seeming. It turns out every relevant had a happy ending after all. The end.